Today, we're diving into something that could literally be a game changer if you're a professional trying to buy a home. We're talking about how your job title alone might save you tens of thousands of dollars on your loan. Let's get right into it. You know the feeling, right? You've got a good, solid income, but saving up that huge 20% deposit for a house feels like trying to climb a mountain. It's a really common frustration, and it usually leads to one very expensive problem. And that problem is called lender's mortgage insurance, or LMI. Now, let's be super clear on this. LMI is an insurance policy that you have to pay for. But here's the kicker. It doesn't protect you at all. It protects the bank. It's basically the fee you get charged for not having that 20% deposit. And that fee can be pretty breathtaking. Just how breathtaking? Well, check this out. Based on an example from A&Z, on an $800,000 property, if you only have a 5% deposit, your LMI bill could be more than $36,000. That is a serious amount of money just added on top of your loan. But what if you could just sidestep that whole cost? What if your job title was a secret key that let you get that massive LMI fee completely waived, even with a tiny deposit? Well, for a whole lot of professions, that's not a what if. It's a reality. So let's start with the A-listers of the LMI waiver world: medical doctors and dentists. This is the one group where pretty much all the big banks roll out the red carpet. Yep. Almost every lender out there looks at a doctor or a dentist and sees an incredibly safe bet. Because of your stable career path and high earning potential, banks are practically falling over themselves to get your business. And waiving LMI? That's their number one way to do it. And this is just huge. We're talking about being able to borrow up to 95% of a property's value. That means you could get into a home with just a 5% deposit and pay zero, not a single dollar in LMI. This can literally shave years off the time it takes to save up. And as you can see, the big four banks are all on board. A&Z, Combank, Westpac, NAB, they all have really clear policies covering doctors and dentists. The specific roles might differ a little here and there, but the core professions are covered. And get this, Westpac doesn't even have a minimum income requirement for their eligible doctors. So if you're in this field, you're golden. But what about the rest of us? Okay, now we're getting into the allied health professions. And this, my friends, is where it gets really, really interesting. Because choosing the right bank here could be the difference between paying that 36 grand or paying nothing. So you know how all the banks agreed on doctors? Forget that. For allied health, the policies are a complete patchwork. There is no standard rule, and your eligibility can totally change depending on which bank you talk to. This is where you have to do your homework. Just take a look at this table. It's kind of wild. Let's pick out a couple. Look at nurses and psychologists. 3 of the big 4 say, nope, sorry. But Westpac, they say yes, absolutely, as long as you're earning over $90,000 a year. Or how about a physio? You're good to go with A&Z, Westpac, and NAB, but you're completely excluded at Combank. This just proves you can't assume anything. So, what's the bottom line here? If you're an allied health professional, you probably want to start your search with Westpac and NAB. They just seem to cast a much wider net for these jobs right now. But you've still got to read the fine print, like those income rules at Westpac. Okay, let's switch gears from healthcare and talk about 2 other highly sought-after professions, law and accounting. The good news here is that things get a lot more consistent again, kind of like what we saw with the doctors. So all 4 of the major banks offer these LMI waivers to legal professionals. If you're a lawyer, a solicitor, a barrister, or even a judge, you're very likely to be eligible to borrow up to 90% of a property's value without that LMI fee. But there's one piece of paper you absolutely must have. And this is the deal breaker. It's non-negotiable. You have to have a current, valid practicing certificate. It's not enough to just have a law degree hanging on your wall. The banks have to see that you are actively licensed to do your job right now. And you'll find it's a very similar story for accountants and finance professionals. The waivers are definitely out there, but they are tied directly to your professional credentials. You've got to be a current member of a recognized body like CPA Australia or the CFA Institute. Think of that membership as your golden ticket. All right, before you get too excited and call your bank, let's talk about the details. Because as always, the fine print is where things can get tricky, and getting this stuff wrong can sink your application before it even starts. This one is so important. And NAB actually has a great, clear definition for it. Practicing means you are actively working in the field you're qualified for.
So if you're a qualified doctor, but you're spending all your time working as a musician, you're not going to be eligible. Your main income has to come from that eligible job.
And here's another huge difference you need to be aware of. Income. Combank, for example, has a hard line in the sand. You must earn at least $100,000 if you're a lawyer, accountant, or pharmacist. Westpac sets that bar at $90,000 for their allied health roles. But then you've got ANZ and NAB who don't list a specific dollar amount at all. They're more focused on your registration. So after hearing all this, you might just be wondering, why? Why on earth would a bank just decide to not charge someone a $36,000 fee? Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. They're competing for you. Banks see professionals like you as the perfect long-term customer. You've got high, stable income, which makes you a really low risk. Waiving the LMI is just a really powerful tool they use to win your business, hoping you'll stick with them for the long haul. And that brings us to a final thought. These lists of eligible jobs, they aren't set in stone. They change, they evolve, as banks fight for customers and rethink what a low-risk job looks like. So the real question is, as our economy keeps changing, which stable, high-value profession is going to be the next one to get this incredible perk?